I'm calling this LenTalk Reclaiming the Rabbi's Path. And let me tell you what I mean by that, and I'll introduce the Rabbi's Path in just a minute. But what I'm doing here is trying to look at a new kind of evangelism that moves from drive-through conversion to divine initiation. There's an old saying that hope for the world comes from our newest members of the human family, that every child born is God's sign to the world that there is hope and there's a future. Well, if hope for the world comes from our newest members of the human family, our children, then hope for the church comes from our newest members of the church family, which are our fresh to faith disciples. And that's one of the challenges today is where are our fresh to faith disciples? God's mercies are fresh every morning. So where are these fresh to faith disciples? And how come the church doesn't have more of them? And so I want to make the case that we need to reclaim the rabbi's path. In an age of instant everything, we've created instant conversion. But Jesus never offered a microwave discipleship. And so I want to address, first of all, the problem with evangelism in a box. We've now got communion in these little boxes. Well, we've gone also to evangelism in a box. We package the gospel like fast food, 4 spiritual laws, 5 Roman steps, 1 sinner's prayer. And we wonder why we're producing spiritual consumers rather than committed disciples of Jesus Christ. These aren't bad ingredients, but they're incomplete recipes. The gospel isn't a transaction. The gospel is a transfiguration. And I just want to repeat that because for me, it's the key to everything I'm going to be saying today in this LenTalk. The gospel is not a transaction. It is a transfiguration. And when we make following Jesus as simple as checking boxes or repeating words or saying after me a prayer, we create what Dietrich Bonhoeffer prophetically called cheap grace. The contemporary model of evangelism promises all too often heaven without the cross, salvation without surrender, and relationship without responsibility. Think about it. Jesus never carried tracts or passed them out. He never simplified his message to make it more palatable. Instead, he offered a followership model of conversion, if you will. He made following him sound harder than even his listeners expected. And this is one of the things that we've lost and we've missed. And I missed it until I rediscovered, I knew about this a long time ago, but I just forgot about it, this 3 rejection rule for rabbis. Jewish tradition gives a powerful metaphor, I think, for how to do evangelism. When someone approaches a rabbi seeking conversion, a Gentile, the rabbi turns them away not once, not twice, but 3 times. Only if they persist, proving their sincerity, proving their commitment, proving that they're really serious, does the rabbi agree to guide them. And this isn't about creating arbitrary obstacles to get to Jesus. It's about ensuring that the seeker counts the cost before beginning a journey that will make and reshape their identity for life. Because Jesus gives us a whole new identity. And what I failed to do in the past in reading the story, and I wrote a whole book on evangelism called Nudge. Um, and I wish I'd have included this there. So I'm trying to uh, give you an expanded, revised edition of what I would add to Nudge, if I could. Jesus is deeply rooted in the Jewish tradition, and he embodies this approach differently than the traditional rabbis did, but distinctly. It's distinctly there, but differently. To the rich young ruler asking about eternal life, Jesus responded not with a prayer to repeat after him, but a command to sell everything. Whoa. Let's try again. To eager volunteers proclaiming, I'll follow you anywhere, Jesus replied with stark warnings about homelessness and hardship. You know, the foxes have holes, birds have nests, and are you prepared to be on the road? To the crowds, Jesus declared that anyone who wouldn't hate family ties, in other words, break patriarchy is another way of putting that today, in today's language, in comparison to your love for him, cannot be my disciple. That's an exact quote. Cannot be my disciple. Unless you love this new family more than your old family, you cannot be my disciple. In each case, Jesus didn't make the path easier. He clarified his demands, not to exclude, but to ensure and invite authentic commitment. And so we have to move from a decision-based model of evangelism to a disciple-shaped model of evangelism. And what I'm asking you here is to consider replacing our closing the deal evangelism with an opening the journey invitation. In other words, think of evangelism less as, okay, it's time to close the deal, let's sign on the dotted line, make a decision here. And there needs to be a decision. I mean, and we'll come to that in just a second. But there's also, we need to focus more on, we're opening a path here to an invitation to a pilgrimage. Are you ready for it? Are you ready to walk with us and talk with us? An invitation to a journey, a pilgrimage. I come out of a tradition called pilgrim holiness. I love both of those words. We've lost the meaning of both of them, but pilgrim, we are all pilgrims on this pathway. And part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, discipleship is pilgrimage. And it's a pilgrimage in sanctification, which is holiness. So in some ways, justification is in that word pilgrim. I've decided to go on this journey. I'm a pilgrim. But holiness is, okay, now you're on this pilgrimage. It's a pilgrimage towards a holy life, a godly life, a whole life, an abundant life. So to do this, I think we got to move some things. So number one, we got to move from contract to covenant. Modern evangelism presents faith as a contract. Pray this prayer, get eternal life. Biblical faith is a covenant, a transfigurational relationship requiring mutual commitment. You say, what's the difference? A contract is about what you get. A covenant is about who you become. And that's the major shift, number one. Number two, we got to move from event to process. And this is where this whole question of decision comes in. We've reduced salvation to a moment, and Jesus presented it as a pilgrimage. The disciples didn't experience one moment of conversion. They walked, they talked, they journeyed with Jesus for 3 years, failing, falling, learning, growing. We reduce salvation to a moment. Jesus presented it as a pilgrimage. And for us, it has become a quote, moment of decision. Now, the disciples didn't experience one moment of conversion. They walked with Jesus for 3 years. They had this whole encounter with him on a daily basis, 24/7. What began as a moment of decision to follow him unfolded into a lifelong process of discipleship. So there's this union here of moment of decision, life of discipleship, where the initial step of justification ignited a ongoing journey of sanctification. And the choice to trust him deepened into a calling to make disciples. So the shift. An invitation to faith should look more like apprenticeship than acquisition. So this is the second one as we move from event to process. The invitation to faith should look more like apprenticeship than acquisition. Number 3, from answer to question. Often, our evangelism gives answers before people ask questions. Jesus often responded to questions with deeper questions. Who do you say that I am? Who do you want to be well? What do you want me to do for you? And these questions invite the seekers to discover their own hungers rather than consume prepackaged solutions, as if we know what your problem is, what your situation is, and we have these one-sided kind of answers to your questions. The rabbinic style evangelism, if we were to practice it today, how might it look practically? And this is where I've come up with 3 invitations. Instead of one invitation to accept Jesus, offer 3, I don't want to use progressive, but processive invitations. Number 1, based on John 1:39, come and see. Invite curiosity without pressure. Let seekers, which are really, if you know, read my stuff, I call them hiders, because we're the ones hiding. God's a seeker. But people who are questing and questioning, let them experience community, worship, and service alongside other disciples. Come and see, but come and see is experience the community. Number 2, count the cost. This is Luke 14:28. When interested and interest deepens, help these hiders, seekers, questioners, questers understand the implications. And this is where we have to create honest space for honest questions about difficulties. Following Jesus might mean changing your priorities. Are you open to that? Following Jesus may want you to do things that you don't want to do. Are you open to that? Jesus may take you in directions you do not wish to go. Are you open to that? Are you sure? So number 1, come and see. Number 2, count the cost. Number 3, cross and community. This is Mark 8:34. And only now you invite full commitment, not just to kind of some beliefs, but to the way of Jesus, to walking the pilgrim way that is lived in community with others' disciples. Now, I want to also think that to us to think about how our altar calls need altering depending on the seasons of life and of faith and of pilgrimage. And there's a winter season where you allow doubts and questions without rushing to resolution. There's a spring season where we plant seeds through authentic relationships and service. There's a summer season where you nurture growing interest with substantive teaching and really in-depth instruction and tutoring. And the fall season where you harvest genuine commitment rooted in understanding. I think we need to rethink of altar calls as seasonal alterings. That's ALTERINGS. We also need to move from thinking of an evangelist as a salesperson to a Sherpa. And a long time ago, I wrote a whole series of sermons on Sherpa, reframing leadership in terms of Sherpas. The evangelist role shifts from closer to guide. We walk alongside, pointing out both the breathtaking vistas and the dangerous crevices on this pilgrimage journey called discipleship. And let me end here with what I call the paradox of difficulty. Jesus' model of evangelism confronts us with a paradox. Making discipleship sound appropriately challenging doesn't reduce genuine conversion, I believe, but enhances it. In other words, to make something harder actually, in some ways, makes it more appealing and authentic. When we present the full picture, both the cost and the reward, we find fewer takers, but more new creations, more transfigured lives. The rich young ruler walked away sad, but Peter, who witnessed what that rich young ruler did, declared, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. So true evangelism isn't about getting someone to pray a prayer today. It's about inviting them into a covenant relationship that will transfigure every tomorrow. So I end with where we began. The problem isn't that we've made salvation too easy. It's that we've made discipleship optional, which is why I wrote a book that I'm going to talk about. I'm doing some Len book talks, and I want to explain why I wrote this book, Designer Jesus, um, the life story of a disciple, and why I believe this is a book on discipleship that if you really understand what I'm saying here and resonate with it, this book is written for you. Thank you for helping me and sticking with me and letting me suggest some reinventions, reframings, recodings of that word evangelism.